Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to take place in the 12th chapter in the book of Proverbs. We're going to be approaching it topically as opposed to the expository verse by verse approach. Now, the Proverbs of Solomon that we read of in the 10th chapter are distinct of the Proverbs that we read of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel, in the first chapter. The first 9 chapters, they have a thematic unity and continuity, whereas those which are come after it are the succession of proverbs are almost arranged arbitrarily. More frequently, does a proverb have no conceptual connection to its predecessor or its successor than it does, and because so what we've been doing is arranging these in the ways that makes the most narrative sequential sense to us. Of course, we cannot cover every verse in there, but we could get as many as we can in, and because we have so many to cover today, we're just going to hop right into it. Verse 3, a man is not established by wickedness, but the root of the righteous shall not be moved. Verse 12, the wicked shall covet the catch of evildoers, but the root of the righteous yields fruit. Verse 7, the wicked are overthrown and are no more, but the house of the righteous stands. Now, the word we read in each of these is the root of the righteous and then the house of the righteous. So the superior in strength foundation of the righteous and the wise over the wicked are made self-evident through the juxtaposition. So verse 3, a man cannot, wickedness can get you ahead in the world for a little bit, and sin does have its pleasure for a season, but it is a poor long-term investment. A man cannot be established and expect to flourish and last through wickedness. But the root of the righteous does not come with any of the attendant baggage of the corruption of the way of the wicked. It is pure, it is straight, it is honest, it has integrity. So that is, they have the firm foundation that cannot be moved by any force of strength. And verse 12, the way of the wicked, they covet the catch of evildoers, and to covet is a sin, the final one, the attitudinal one in the righteous laws of the Decalogue, the final 5 of which pertain to our behavior governing humans. We are not to covet the goods, that which does not belong to us, not another man's wife, not another man's property, not another man's car. The Bible speaks to modernity as well. This is the catch of the evildoers, and the wicked, they covet. So wicked people and evildoers are closely connected company, and the wicked among them. So there is a network of envy within the network of evildoers. But once more, the root of the righteous yields fruit. There is something positive that comes out of the root of the righteous. From the firm, immovable, stable foundation comes fruit in abundance, and fruit is analogous to virtue. So he's not talking about literal fruit here, but the fruits are the spiritual seeds that we grow. So righteousness spreads by contagious. So this is something we want to have, an immovable root of righteousness that yields fruit and just brings blessings and blesses us as we are there. Verse 7, the wicked are overthrown and are no more. The wicked, they can be established, but they are not established in the sense, to bring it back to the third verse, because they are soon overthrown. Wickedness goes in rapid successions and cycles, and it's just a vicious spasm, an endless circle of one displacing the next and one betraying, and through deceit and subterfuge. But the house of the righteous stands, and this brings us to the New Testament, the Master's parable in the 7th chapter of Matthew's account of the Sermon of the Mount. He who hears my words and obeys them, not only hears them but does them, is likened to a man who builds his house in the solid foundation of a stone, whereas the foolish one who treats with indolence and indifference trivially that which demands to be treated significantly are likened to one who builds a house on the flimsy foundation of the sand. So when the storm comes, of course, the house of the wise and the righteous and the obedient is going to be provide a greater shelter of security than that which is built through wickedness. So the lesson of these three verses is crime doesn't pay, evil doesn't pay, sin doesn't pay. It has wages. It is death. And we read in the 28th verse, this isn't on our list, and the way of righteousness is life, and in its pathway there is no death. But we're going to return to the 5th in the 20th and the 15th, or the 5th and the 20th verse. The thoughts of the righteous are judgment. The counsels of the wicked are deceit. So from two opposite cast of characters, they have two different orientations, opposite orientations. The righteous, their mind is energized and oriented towards the cause of justice, making sure what is fair and what is right in the world, and that the weak aren't exploited or taken advantage of, and people don't do things to people just because they can. This is what the righteous think about. But the counsels of the wicked thoughts are connected to counsels, because counselors exist to provide their spoken out thoughts to kings. So wicked men it would be dangerous for a king to surround himself with wicked counselors, because their counsel is based on lies, and he has nothing positive to say about dishonesty or manipulation of language. In the 20th verse, deceit is in the heart of those who plot evil, but counselors of peace have joy. The heart issue, every issue is a heart, because at the heart of every problem is the problem of the heart. And those who plot evil, what is wrong with their hearts is that it is polluted by deceit. They love lies, they live in lies, they are lies. Their heart is a lie. Their entire existence is a lie. So the camouflage of concealment are necessary for those who plot evil. The entire purpose of crime is to get away and to have no one know you do it. So that is what he speaks. But surround yourselves now. It is wise for a king to surround himself with counselors who have of peace. And Solomon's reign very much was devoted to peace. His name Solomon. Solomon is semantically derivative of the Hebrew word for shalom, which translates as peace. So his reign was one of peace and joy and prosperity and abundance. It was a golden age, the likes of which had never been seen and would never be seen again in the covenant nation of Israel. Verse 15, he says, the way of the fool is right in his own eyes, but he who listens to advice is wise. The fool, they don't need a counselor, because they have the know-it-all mentality, where the wise are humbly aware of their own ignorance. As a man's knowledge increases on the path to wisdom, in simultaneous proportion will his awareness of his own ignorance increase at least as much. And that is just the way of the wise. Solomon was a wise king. He relied on advisors. He wasn't so foolish or headstrong as to think he could manage his empire and make it flourish and prosper in as much as he did, without the helpful input of a multitude and quality of advisors to give him useful information in order to make the most informed decision. Verse 1, whoever loves discipline loves knowledge, but he who hates reproof is stupid. This echoes in earlier Proverbs, as early as the first one, the more famously connected to the fear of Yahweh, 1:7. So discipline is not pleasant, it is not fun, but there is blessing in the pain, and it has educative and remedial value. So if we love discipline, we will love knowledge, and we will grow in knowledge through our discipline. Discipline teaches us to not do certain things, and also to do the right things. But if you hate it, if you just resist and reject it and can't look past the lack of immediate gratification from the pain, then that is the mark and the measure. That is a sure sign of stupidity, to hate people trying to correct you and people trying to improve you, people who in fact have your best interest at heart and only want what's best for you to hate the one who administers the discipline. Verse 24, the hand of the hard worker rules, but the lazy is put to compulsory labor. This was a possibility in the ancient world. people were reduced to literal slavery on account of their indebtedness. So the moral of the story is, work hard like your freedom depends upon it, because it actually does. He is a king writing to the commoner, and a lazy, indolent king is perhaps more dangerous, but the microcosm is never so insignificant as to not be worthy of note or attention. Verse 27, the lazy one has no game to roast, but the hard worker prizes his possession. The lazy one has no one but himself to blame for his lack of provision and lack of luxury and lack of meal. Had he worked hard, then he would value his possessions. He would have possessions to have, and the actual working and earning of possession entitles one to a greater enjoyment than if one was lazy and was just born into fantastic wealth and never had to work a day in their life. He who knows what it's like to be poor is, of course, going to be able to enjoy that wealth, unless, of course, he's so dominated by the sinful pursuit thereof. But verse 8, a man is praised according to his wisdom, but the perverted of heart becomes despised. This is a heart issue, the next several verses, but the first half, Proverbs always consist of A and B, and 8a is, if you have wisdom, you will be praised if it is recognized. That is not an automatic expectation that your wisdom will always be acknowledged, respected, or even known. But when it is known, that there is positive praise. And so not every fool is going to know every wise person, but amongst the wise there is positive praise, and that is good. But if you are perverted in heart, you are despised, and rightly so, because from the perverted heart springs all the actions and orientations which lead to the actions of the practical sins that are despised and detested and declared an abomination by Yahweh. And perverted of heart is not limited to sexual perversion alone. It is a more all-encompassing perversion, which means just a debased, degraded, degenerate mind. Verse 11, he who tills his land is satisfied with bread, but he who pursues vanities is lacking heart. In hindsight, I might have arranged this differently, connecting it to the agriculture, but remember, we connected this with the heart. So if you pursue vanities, a vanity is the word that proliferates and abounds throughout Solomon's other work of wisdom literature, Ecclesiastes. That word appears 35 times. It is so it means that without substance, that's without value, that without meaning. So if you are pursuing vanities, and the vanities that he lists are wealth, and also wisdom, and also pleasure, and also work, everything under the sun is vanity in that book, but he's writing from an earlier age when he had the assurance of answers. He wasn't haunted by the questions which came to haunt him in his later years. But of course, diligence is its own reward. If you till your land, you're going to have the bread and enjoy it and be satisfied because you worked for it. So moral of the story, take care of your field and treat it with respect and dignity and accordingly. Anxiety of the heart of man causes depression, but a good word makes him glad. Depression is a fact of life, and increasingly aggressive expansion of depression, but this is very much a first world problem. Third world country problems are starvation and survival. So depression is very much a first world luxury, and much of it is because our entire society is pursued and oriented towards these vanities, the pursuit of wealth and accumulating who you're accumulating it for. So, of course, there is much, the news, the good news is the remedy. If you saturate yourself only with the news on the television, you will miss out on the good news in the Bible. So it's good to have the Bible in one hand and watching the news in the others. We can literally witness the unfolding of the end times in its incremental stages. So pay attention to what goes on in the world. That is a wise thing to do. It is also a right thing to do, but have it supplemented by the knowledge of the Bible. And if you only listen to, the people, the press, they're all liars and thieves. They have stolen trust. They have stolen time with their perpetual dishonesty. But depression is more multifaceted. It comes from more angles alone than listening to the bad news. A lot of people just don't have a sense of purpose or mission or destiny in their life, and they feel trapped in a repetitive rat race. So that causes depression. But the cure and the antidote and the solution is a good word in a good season. How good it is to speak such a one. When you have the right word, if you say it at the right time to the right person at the right occasion, there's literally nothing like it in any conversation. And so this connects to the next verse, verse 18. Rash speaking is like piercings of a sword, but the tongue of the wise is healing. So the antidote is in 18b, the tongue of the wise, which brings healing. But by way of contrast, that is the cure for the anxiety of the heart, which dominates the one who is depressed in verse 25. Our words are weapons, and you can build with them. You can use a hammer to build a building, or you can use it to bash someone over the brain with. Our words are like-minded. They are more. The power of speech is morally neutral. How we use that power of speech is a test of our agency. So we can use, the rash speaking, speaking compulsively without thought, without care, without calculation, to speak before you think. Thinking is logically prior to speaking, but rash speaking is a mark and measure of a fool. And when you do not think about what you say in advance of saying it, you are causing wounds and injuries and just collateral damage through your own rash talk. It is far better to contemplate your words and calculate your words and consider your words than to speak rashly, because we want to bring healing with our words. We don't want to tear others down. We want to uplift, exalt, and build, not diminish, destroy, degrade, or anything like that. So there are definite do's and don'ts for language that are made plain in wisdom literature. Verse 6, the words of the wicked are lie in wait for blood, but the mouth of the straight delivers them. This corresponds with the sadistic sinner who Solomon advises his son not to be enticed by their what they say in verse 18 in the first chapter. They lie in wait for blood. They live for bloodshed. They cannot get to sleep without plotting evil or knowing about the evil that they are going to do the next day. That is how dominated by wickedness they are. But mouth, our mouth can also not only heal others, but extract ourselves out of situations. In the New Testament, we have the promise that the disciples were to be dragged before the authorities in the synagogues and in the jails and before the Gentile kings as a witness to him, and they were told not to take any premeditation to what they would say, because they were assured of the Holy Spirit's presence, who would give them the right word at the right moment and the right time for them. But their calling is not our calling. So we have to, as a general rule and principle, approach our language with calculation. Think about what we say before we say it. Don't just shoot off at the mouth, shoot off at the hip. That's when you say dangerous, destructive things. But if we do find ourselves in similar situations where because the disciples' call does have an echo, in the Mount Olivet discourse, is both pertinent to the destruction of the events culminating around the destruction of the temple, but it also has an echo in the end times, which we are fast approaching. Verse 13, and the transgressions of the lips is an evil snare, but the righteous get out of distress. So you can sin by speaking so much, and the sin nature is rampant in our language and in our tongues and in our lips and in our mouths. So it's not the physical edifices he is addressing. It is the words which spring from the thoughts, which emanate from the hearts, that come out of it. So people, to speak sinfully is to lay a snare for others and for yourselves. And one of the self-destructive, self-defeating moral law of cause and effects of wickedness is that they are eventually ensnared by the own snares that they lay with the intent of trapping others. They eventually fall foot in it themselves. They lay so many snares down that they get trapped in them. But the righteous are wise and prudent, and they avoid danger. Danger comes to them, but they can get themselves out of dangerous predicaments by maintaining their calmness and assurance of God's presence. He will see us through. He will get us out. The Christian life is not a bag of roses. It is not a rose-paved path. Virtually no one ever arrived in heaven on a feather bed. The way of agony was the way that our Lord went there, and if that was the way for him, then what right or reasonable expectation do we have it to be any other way that for us? But I ultimately veered from the text there. Verse 22, lying lips are an abomination to Yahweh, but those who deal truly are his delight. Yahweh does not look kindly on lying lips. Lying is a sin. It is the sin of dishonesty. It is in the Decalogue, one of the moral laws which govern our interactions. We are not to lie to each other. We are not to deceive or manipulate or deliberately spread misinformation or false information. There is some excuse for ignorance, but deliberate dishonesty and inadvertent ignorance, sometimes we like to judge ourselves by our intentions, whereas others judge us by the results. We judge other people by the results, and we judge ourselves by the intention. So know what you're saying. Don't just spout off at the lips if you don't know what you're talking about, because that is an abomination. That is the strongest, most powerful word of derision. That means God hates that. And my fear is that many of the times you read in the abominations that are described, Satan makes it sound so harmless when God says, I hate that. Many Christians have this distorted picture of God as a being who is so all-loving, and he is an omnibenevolent creature, all good. But he hates certain things, and he declares them abominations. And some of the abominations, go against the cultural grain of our postmodern society. But what the word declares an abomination, and lying is despised by any culture, any people, any place, any time. No one likes a liar, and no one likes to be a liar. So the existence of a liar depends on lying sufficiently enough so that others do not know that they are liars. And the danger of lying is that it has a contagious web. Once you tell a first lie, then you have to tell another lie to protect it and to keep it going, and it's just a vicious cycle, an endless circle. Verse 19, the lips of truth is established forever, but a lying tongue is but for a moment. Truth is eternal by its very nature. 2 plus 2 is always going to equal 4. That is a true statement. It is as true as the foundation of the earth as it will be when the consummation and everywhere in between. So we are connected to the eternal when we speak truth. Truth is eternally so. There is no what is true in one place and time. The satanic school of thought of relativity of truth. Truth has an objective character and an objective nature, and it stems from an eternal one. Our God is an absolute being, absolutely wise, absolutely powerful, absolutely moral, and he does speak to us in moral absolutes, and he does lay the objective truths before us that we have to keep if we ourselves want to be established forever. We have to speak his truth and live by his truth, every word that proceed out of the mouth of Yahweh, not just the ones that we don't like. But lies are ephemeral. Their effect are rather ephemeral. The liar gets away with it, maybe this scheme, but he is just plotting. He is establishing the habit that will lead to his own sure, sudden self-destruction. He's going to tell the wrong lie to the wrong person in the wrong way, and he's not going to get away with it. So far better to speak truth, which is eternal, than bask in lies. The effectiveness is ephemeral and fleeting and transitory and impermanent. Verse 23, clever man is concealing knowledge, but the heart of fools proclaims folly. Clever is alternately translated as prudent, but just a clarification, prudence is the, clever is, I feel prudent is the better word because prudent is the pragmatic, action-oriented response to certain situations. One who is clever, that has a morally neutral, but it does have a slightly a derogatory implicit entailment. Clever men are men of mischief. Can be said to be clever men. So we just want to establish that it still makes sense. But the prudent people, they do not suffer from the fool's odd compulsion to advertise on the loudspeaker how foolish they are. Foolishness, by its very nature, is self-aggrandizing, self-advertising, self-promoting. It has to let everyone in the room know how foolish he is, where the wise are content to know that they are wise and they don't care who else knows it, because cast not our pearls before swine. And what is a word of wisdom going to be in the ears of a fool if the heart of the fools just exudes their folly? And we don't have to tell everything that we do know is not necessary to make known to others, and to reduce it to a cliche, no one cares how much you know, they need to know how much you care. 16th and final verse. A fool's wrath is known at once, but a clever one covers shame. Clever, once more, is more aptly translated as prudent, but a mark and a sure sign and a dead giveaway of a fool is the instantaneous wrath over petty trivialities the fool takes personally. The fool does not have the perspective to look beyond himself to see the bigger picture. So they are prone to wrath because anger is an unintelligent emotion. So unintelligent people are naturally prone to bask in it, and once more, the fool, they suffer from the odd compulsion to let everyone know in the room, so they know at once, instantaneously and thoroughly. Fools are on a fool's errand to advertise exactly how foolish, how rash, how stupid they are to everyone in earshot. But the mark and a measure of a prudent or clever one is to cover shame, to to be discreet about about other people's sins, and to do no evil, so that no evil may be spoken to you. Do no thing that can bring shame on your name, and more importantly, the God you represent. So when we bear his name, we cannot be ashamed. Romans 1:16. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you're here. Stay tuned until next time. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.